Hello, hello, most beautiful stars. Hello, hello. Good to be with you. And yes, of course, I'm playing with my lights. My eyes are kind of peculiar today, as in they're not working all that great. So maybe I'm seeing things from new eyes, different perspective, right? So I need lots of light this evening. You have entered into Edgar Cayce Life Skills Studies. I am Courtney, the host of Stars of the Morning Light. We started the last time we were together for Edgar Cayce, we started in a new material. Edgar Cayce, Earth Changes. And we've done one episode and got through very little. This book reads just as if it were transcripts. It literally reads like a transcript, as in they would lay Edgar down, he would go into his meditative state, his trance-like state, or somebody would induce it for him, and then there are questions, answers from the Akashic via the body of form of Edgar, and somebody's transcribing all of them. This reads like no one's tried to interpret anything, straight from the Akashic, question to answer transcripts. So it's not as easy to pick up as I read hearing it. And so I'm going to do my best to kind of break things down, because if you're not used to listening to transcripts, which maybe some of you are, there's tons of podcasts out there that are just transcripts of stuff, but for a lot, it's not so easy to pick up when someone is just reading it. So I will do my best to throw in little notes for everyone. And I see that Seeker came in. Good to see you, my dear. And Venus is here. Good to see you, my dear. Yes. So just to kind of sum up the first episode, we are in prehistory. So it says Earth changes. Well, in this, it starts with the changes in prehistory. As many of the viewers here, we question what we know about history. What is in our history books? We question it, and rightly so, right? This is giving a kind of a different spin on some stuff, and tonight we're going into some actual numbers, as in how long have humans been here? Very much not what they say. So take what you want, leave the rest. Welcome in. It's good to be with everyone. Real quick to sum up last time, they talked about the 5 races. And yes, they used colors, which is interesting because we still use colors today. So we had the yellow, the white, the brown, the black, and the red. And they said all races of people were projected, by the way. That was repeated many times. The human race was projected. All of the humans were projected at once, simultaneously onto the earth. Now, I'm bringing this back into our memory because we're actually going to be talking about how many humans was it? How many peoples were on the planet, and at what time frame are we looking at number-wise, right? Also, there was a description about our landmass and how I'm going to read just just 2 little sections, so we can kind of open our minds back to what we may think we know is not necessarily what it was. So in one of the sections that we read last time, it said the polar regions were then turned to where they occupied more of a tropical or semi-tropical regions. I want to remind those that are here in the States, because the majority of the viewers of Stars of the Morning Light are in the States. Remember that it said what we see of the North America, that is not accurate as to way back when, as in it stated there was only really the high plateaus of things. So portions of Nevada, Utah, Arizona formed the greater part of what we know now as the United States. The rest was underwater. So, on our side of the Atlantic, and it also, as we can remember, it said that the Nile ran its water into the Atlantic Ocean. So, for us, those in the States here, what we live in didn't even exist back then. Maybe it was way underwater, but it was definitely not inhabited. So think of mostly on this side of the water. So Canada, North America, South America, think all the highlands, all the plateaus, all the very high, like the mountains, the mountain regions. They would have been presented. You gotta think that that's fascinating. And with the pole regions, I want to say that again because we have an entire series here about the pole shift here at Stars of the Morning Light. It's a playlist. You can go and listen to it because we're entering into that aspect. And humans have done this before. I mean, they're talking about the first humans and how the poles were very different. And I even used another material to convey this idea in the first video in the first show. The pole regions were then turned to where they occupied more of a tropical and semi-tropical regions. So in our life of today, we put the tropics at the equator. We put the tropics at our equator, right? The closest to the equator is the warmest. We learn this in school. Well, they're saying our poles were very different. Very different. So for us to wrap our heads around the earth at this time, the Akashic through Edgar's mouth told us it would be very hard for you to wrap your head around it because it very much does not look like anything you know of. The Sahara deserts, they weren't deserts. That was greatly inhabited with lush land. So bear with us. And I do love that in today's world, 100 years after Edgar Cayce, that we have more information now. More evidence is being dug up. We have all this material out there that we can listen to, read, absorb of scientists, archaeologists, all sorts of folks that are saying, hey, this land here was not like this, or this land over here was not like this. So we're kind of privileged in that right compared to when Edgar Cayce was living. And that recorded reading where they're discussing that was given in November 17th, 1932. So all of us humans today that have an opportunity to study, learn, listen, watch a bunch of different shows, that's amazing. That's wonderful. That's part of our expansion. So tonight I'm going to continue on with this concept of like the human race. I know at the end of the first video to this source material, Earth Changes, I said that we were going to get into how the humans defeated the beast. That's not going to be tonight because I know there's more. There's some stuff I got to cover first. We will get to the beast, the many beasts, the large beasts, the beasts that were too big for us, right? Oh, hi, Chloe. Good to see you, my dear. And do know if you're listening to this later, I am doing a live stream and I try to communicate with those in the chat, at least say hello and acknowledge them because it is always beautiful to acknowledge one another. Okay, so I'm going to continue going from kind of where they are, but it's another reading. So this reading was at that. So we read the one from November 17th, 1932. And that talked about all the different race of people and what the land masses actually looked like. Well, now we're going to, and it's the next one in the book, This is the background of this recorded reading for context purposes is regarding the appearance of humankind in the earth and the beginning of the first attempts to understand humankind's relationship to the Creator. And this reading is 5748 2, May 28th, 1925. So this was actually recorded years before the 1932 one. This a lot of when Edgar would be under and whomever would be asking the questions. Of course, because think 100 years ago, they didn't have access like we do. A lot of the stuff kept being asked about and talked about over and over again. So even though years had passed, this starts with, hey, the reading that from they let me go into it because the questions actually it's going to be the next one. So they cover a lot of things over a great amount of time, especially, oh my goodness, when people would be asking about like reincarnation and some of the accuracy of the Bible or Atlantis, that conversation and question and answer would continue and continue and continue. So I'm going to read some of this. Actually, folks, pause with me just for a moment. Take a nice, lovely breath. I'm going to switch this up. I'm making a judgment call. I'm going to do the reading that is in here that follows up from our first reading. Then I'm going to jump back to the 1920 or the oh no, I can't. I'm sorry. Hold one moment. Interesting. Okay, no, I'm going to stay right where I am. Thank you for breathing. Thank you for breathing. Sometimes, like even at the end of this, I'm going to jump to page 15 because how it is set up as in this is just transcripts, they might bring up something in a reading in 1932 or 1925 or 19 whatever. And then the thing that ties the thing that ties it in, the other dot that's missing, right? The other puzzle piece that's missing is in a completely different reading from, 1928. So I might be jumping around a little bit, but it's to connect the dots for everybody. It really is. Okay, so we're just going to keep going with what we got. And I appreciate you all for sticking with me. This reading is 5748 2, May 28th, 1925. And this is they're just continuing on. Now, as we see, as given, how and what the classifications were of the physical in the Earth's plane at that period, meaning the Earth, meaning America was mostly water, other than Utah, Nevada, meaning the Earth. The numbers then of human souls in the Earth plane being 133 million souls. So remember, they said, were the humans dropped instantaneously? And they said, yes. Were they projected into this matrix? Yes. 133 million. 133 million of the white, yellow, red, brown, black. 133 million. on apparently land that we're not even aware of. The beginning then of the understanding of laws was applied from man's viewpoint, being in this second rule in the country now Egypt. I'm going to keep going and make sense of this. The rule governing the period of 199 years and the entity giving the chance to the peoples for the study being in the 28th year when he began to gather the peoples together for this and surrounding himself with those of that land and of various lands wherein the human life dwelled at that period. The numbers of people that came together for the purpose, then numbering some 44. Okay, now I do want to note when they said when he began to gather the peoples, that he is in brackets. That he is in brackets. When something's in brackets, that is a assumption. That is, we believe the Akashic meant he, but the Akashic probably said when began, as in there is no feminine or masculine identity to the ruler. The second rule. So let's bring it back up. So 133 million souls across the board. That's a lot. That's a lot in comparison to what people. I'm going to read this part again. The beginning then of the understanding of laws as applied from from man's viewpoint. I gotta read that part just again before I even get to the ruler aspect. The beginning then of the understanding of laws as applied from man's viewpoint. Being in this second rule in the country now Egypt. The second rule. So I'm going to put it out there that for us in context, this would be as if after a flood or after something happens, right? We just want to put it out there that this is a second rule over people, a second chance. They even say the entity giving the chance to the peoples. The rule governing the period of 199 years. And the entity giving the chance to the peoples for the study being in the 28th year. Everybody, please put that over yonder somewhere for yourself right now, okay? We will get to way later. When he began to gather the peoples together for this, and surrounding himself with those of that land and of various lands wherewithin the human life dwelled at that period. The numbers of people that came together for the purpose, then numbering some 44. The courts as were made were in the tents and the caves of the dwellers of then chosen priests from Arabia or Theban country, who came as one among to assist in the astrologer, the soothsayers, and the soothsayers of the desert of now the eastern and western worlds. And with this, the conclave was held for many, many moons. So that 44 is a representative of the different groups of peoples, a representative to come to a court to assist with the astrologer, the soothsayers, be under the rule of what is now we know of Egypt. This conclave was held for many, many moons. The period in the world's existence from the present time being 10.5 million years. And the changes that have come in the earth's plane, many have risen in the lands. Many, many lands have disappeared. Many have appeared and disappeared again and again during these periods, gradually changing as the condition became to the relative position of the earth with the other spheres through which man passes in this solar system. So, this is why many of you, you beautiful beings, this is why many of you might hear me say, okay, which catastrophe, which beginning and ending, ending and beginning, which one? Because when land masses start coming and going, moving and a shaking, disappearing and reappearing, that's big for us peoples. So, which cycle of time and space and things happening marks our memory, our actual what we think history is, right? Because they just said the period in the world's existence from present time began or being 10.5 million years. I have no idea what the science says. I really don't. I stopped listening to science in that aspect of, oh, humans have only been around for 20,000 years or, however many years, I stopped listening a long time ago because take that in, beloveds, please. 10.5 million years ago. I don't believe science is stating that. But it is because cycles end, cycles begin, cycles end, cycles begin. Whole sections of Earth go into the sea, then they pop out. Over here, they do this, they do that. Our track record as to what is accurate for the existence of humans, in my humble opinion, has never been accurate. It's just not accurate. Shelley just said real history is not what we were taught. Exactly. Exactly. And we know this. We're educated humans and we can see the evolution of history be changed over time. We can notice how the Mandela effect happens. I mean, if something's not talked about, it's easily wiped clean, right? If something is not presented. So that is based on the human memory. So let's keep going. So, I just want to make it clear though, there are representatives, 44 representatives that are going to this court that happened many, many moons for a very long time. And when it talks about the relationship of the gradual changes as the condition became to the relative position of the earth with the other spheres through which man passes in this solar system. So you'll find this interesting. The first laws, the first laws. Now, I know y'all can hear me when I say that because everybody talks about the universal laws. The first laws. Then, meaning then when Egypt was in its second rule, then partook of that of the study of self, the division of the mind, the division of the solar systems, the division of man in the various spheres of existence through the earth plane and through the earth's solar system. So, the first laws that we were to study and to learn and to adopt and to take part in, study of self, the division of the mind, the division of the solar systems, the division of man in the various spheres of existence through the earth plane and through the earth's solar system. Then they bring up the Book of the Dead. The Book of the Dead, then, as it was written then, being the first of those that were written as the inscribed conditions necessary for the development in the earth or in the spiritual planes. So they do go on to say those 44, right? That then would go to this council, be in the meetings, get the laws, would then go back to their peoples and deliver those laws to them in whichever variation kind of worked for those people. Remember, we had people mainly from Arabian and Tibetan countries. Well, we had all of them really there, 44, right? That are then they go back, they go, here's some laws. Let me tell you some stories. Let me tell you how this can go. Let me talk to you about these divisions of your mind. Let me talk about this division of the solar systems. Let me talk to you about these spheres that we travel through. Let's talk about this. Let's learn about this. Let's do it in a lot of times story form. And we're still doing it today. And what's sad about that is if you really take that in, folks, that means the first laws here for us humans, we're all about the division. We're all about the division. So this is when you might see shorts that I put out there and I say, what happens if one day you just wake up and all universal laws that you think apply, like gravity even, that you think are here, that you think are ruling over us, if all of those universal laws, quote unquote, no longer applied, no longer existed. I put shorts out like there to entice the mind. They're difficult. I know they're difficult, but it's because I also know what those laws are, and we no longer need them. They're talking about those who would then teach their individuals. Hence the difference in the manner of approaching the same sacrificial conditions in various spheres, yet all using the sun, the moon, the stars as the emblems of the conditions necessary for the knowledge of those elements as entered in, same as the fish representing the water from which all were drawn out, as we would see from the various changes. So everybody's using the same type of stories. Everyone's trying to explain things, the conditions, and they did say sacrificial conditions. When we are here, this is why there is pain and suffering and hurt and what have you. It's the conditions. And it's in the various spheres. We just read it. Yet all using the sun, the moon, and the stars as emblems of the conditions necessary for the knowledge of those elements as entered in. Of those elements as entered in. As in, if you want to leave and enter out or go out, no one enters out. That's an oxymoron. That's not a thing. No one, if you want to leave, right? If you want to leave, you have to go through the way that you came. The sun, the moon, and the stars. Same as when they said, just like how the fish representing the water from which all were drawn out, which they will bring up water, and water is always used in various ways. Think of even, the fluid that we first start growing in, right? So I'm going to keep going. I'm going to keep going. This, ooh, this is quite a lot for people. So come on in and relax, 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 relax. Good to see you, Helen. Good to see you, my dear. We just relax into it. And many of us just be open to remember, be open to your memory. So this is of June 2025. So that one was of May 28th. This is of June 2025, June 1st. So it's a continuation. And I'm actually going to read it when they started. So this is reading 5748-3. So they obviously did a reading. They took a break. They had some dinner. They resumed a couple of days later. So who is asking the question stated it this way. You will have before you the reading given on the psychic work of Edgar Cayce, presented in this room on the afternoon of May 28, 2025, and you will continue with this reading regarding the information of the first laws concerning man's relation to a higher forces. Given this in an outline manner and how this was given to the people. So they're stating to the Akashic, we have the reading that we did on the 28th. We have this before us. We are going to continue that reading, right? So quickly, the Akashic answered through Edgar, yes, we have the information as given and the conditions as surrounded the giving of the first laws as regarding the indwelling of the higher forces in the earth's plane. The man attempting to make man attempting to make application of the same. So now they're going to keep going. So they say, yes, we're going to continue on. I would love everyone to know, again, because I say this a lot, as an Akashic messenger, this is how they talk in a lot of ways. This is how they speak or communicate. This is. And when you ask questions, no one that I ever do a reading for really articulates their question the way questions are articulated to the Akashic, but that's okay because that's my job. That's my job. So it's not as and so let's say you think of questions, right? You're thinking of your questions. If you're kind of not sure how it should be asked, not your job. That's my job. These people, though, over time with Casey, as we will learn in his bio, and we're going to get back to his bio pretty soon, just so everybody can catch up with this Earth changes stuff. When we learn in his bio, these people developed and understood how to ask questions. There was even one time that I believe they asked, "How would you like us to address? How would you like us to ask questions?" Um, I just want you to know this is not so much because it was 100 years ago. Not really. The Akashic has always been and will always be. This is how they communicate. And because Edgar was in a trance-like state that he didn't know his consciousness was a part of this in any way, shape, or form, it's always comes out in their language. And so they will say things like, "You see, we see this, given. We've given this already. We've given this already." I'm sure there can be people that can testify here that if they've had a few readings with me and they ask the same thing, "We've given this already." I know, and sometimes I might say that. So they are informing me that we've already discussed this, right? So please understand, this is how they communicate. That's why to listen to it is not as simple to get there is no real flow. There is no flow. So we continue. This is a continuation of what we just read. Now, as we see, we have the general outline of those conditions of man in the earth plane at the period or age, as is judged from man's viewpoint. Of this gathering, as caused by the second ruler of the peoples that dwelled in that portion of the earth's plane, known now as Egypt. Beloveds, I want to point out again, they said, as is judged from man's viewpoint. So when they are giving information, they are giving it might be different than what we're aware of or what we're used to, but it is still of man's viewpoint. They're giving the information of the peoples that lived then, of the 44 that would go see the ruler in Egypt, of what was happening in the viewpoint of the humans then. That is still how it goes today. And the judgment that people do. There is no judgment in the Akashic. There is to be considered now also those conditions under which man, as man, lived during that period in the various spheres in which man dwelt. In that land, we find the peoples comparatively free from the invasion of the beasts of the field. So this is like around Egypt. They are free from the beast of the field. Save those as were, that should be same as those, but that's okay. Save those as were being used for man's development and for the use of man as servants or as man's beasts of burden. We all know what took place in Egypt, many a times over, by the way. While we find in the now Tibetan country, then the land of many waters, the indwelling of those of many beasts whom man had to defend self against. So in the Tibetan region, the land known as many waters, there were beasts that man continuously had to defend himself. Again, in the Mongolian region, many others of species and nature that were destructive to man's indwelling in many ways. Also, those in uh, Caucasian or the lighter or the white peoples. So, as we learned before, I'm going to refresh everybody's memory. That was like what is now like the lower part of Russia, think United Kingdom area, lower Russia, over Poland, that area. So, also in the land of the plains of the northern spheres in the western portion of the Earth's plane, many beasts and many conditions. And man then was in the way of having a different understanding, for different conditions were to be met, as were also in the southern portion. So different conditions needed to be met. These conditions are all a part of the laws, remember? So are how do we handle these beasts? What are we doing? As I continue. Then, as these were gathered from the 5 nations, we find the subjects of those pertaining to manifestations of the development of man and man's ability to cope with the conditions and the forces wherein men were given their supremacy over the other conditions in the earth's plane. And the first was given by the ruler was then that the force that gives man in his weakest state, as it were, the ability to subdue and overcome the great beasts that inhabit the plane of man's existence, must come from a higher source. So, in so many less words, the ruler in Egypt, as the 44 were assembling, would explain, hey, you have a lot of different conditions where you are, all these different conditions. Some of you have wild beasts. This could be the dinosaurs as well, people, right? It definitely could be. We'll probably get into it. All of that. You've got things going on. This is how you handle this. This is how you handle that. But yet, human, you who are crying and appearing to be very weak in this, you are not. You are not weak. You are able to subdue and overcome any of the conditions in your land. But in order to do so, the power that will come through you must be obtained, must come from higher forces. Hence, the first law of self preservation in the physical plane attributed to divine or higher forces. Just as the elements adding to the betterment of man's condition in the earth plane, we have then so we all understand this, right? We then have the remnants of that, what of that as was taught. Whew. The first law of self-preservation, which makes sense, right? How do we eat? What do we eat? How do we defeat the beast? What do we do for shelter? How do we survive? Self-preservation. So many things. Hence the first law of self-preservation. So universal law. Universal law. Self-preservation. That would come first now, doesn't it? in the physical plane. Hence began as given the study of the indwelling of that other than man's physical powerless. Yet there were many men of giant stature. So before I start about the giant stature, the study of the indwelling of that other than man's physical powerless. So that's the first study. Higher forces to give us the aptitude to handle the conditions for self-preservation. And it's curious to me because uh, we maybe, archaeologists and scientists, whom have you, would think of that as like, oh, so the ruler gave him fire, right? Gave him fire to be able to stay warm and eat and defend against a beast, right? Okay, so fire, great, that's an element. We already knew about the elements. It said it. We already learned that when we were talking about the sun, the moon, and the stars as emblems of conditions necessary for the knowledge of those elements as entered in, as we entered in through the sun, moon, and stars. Same as the fish. I think there was a part in there about the elements, though. I thought we read it. I'm sorry. I'm looking for it, and I know we did read it. Well, it's there somewhere in all these words. We knew about the elements already, though. So this is kind of another layer of like, okay, we can handle all this stuff. What about this? What about that? More conditions, more conditions. There's all these things that we don't know how to handle. Got to connect with a higher force. That is still what is being taught today. And I'm not against it. I'm not against it per se. What is fascinating to me, though, in the 21st century, that that is still a part of the first laws, self-preservation. That is the fascinating part now, isn't it? Because it's no longer a beast. It's no longer a possible dinosaur beast. That's not what it is anymore. Now we're having to search out higher forces against other forms of beast. So when I say things like nothing's really changed, that's where I'm coming from. Even though we are way more, we have so much more potential. Hence the first law of self-preservation in the physical plane attributed to divine or higher forces, just as the elements adding to the betterment of man's condition in the earth plane. We have then the remnants of that as was taught. Hence began as given the study of the indwelling of that other than man's physical powerness. That's not a word. Powernesses. They're trying to make power plural here. Powers, but how it is written out, powers. Let's put it that way. Yet it's very odd because it's written kind of as if it was a feminine energy coming from a different language than English. Yet there were many men of giant stature to meet the conditions as seen. Yet the approach of that same force to some was reached through the power, heat, significant of sun's force, of moon's wave, of waters bringing forth all manners of organisms necessary for the developments in this plane. So, At this time, there are giants who use their brute force to handle the conditions. But at the same time, there were many men who used, and that's why they were making powers plural there, used power, heat, the significance of the sun's force, of moon's wave, of waters bringing forth all manners of organisms necessary for the development in the plane. Sun's force. This to us is where we get all these stories of, oh my goodness, well, what was really going on with, did we have some kind of death ray? Did we have some kind of technology that we're not aware of? Did, the Ark of the Covenant, was that actually some kind of radiation that it beamed out lights to kill those around? Sun's force. This is where we're getting ideas and concepts of like that. Moon's wave. What does the moon control, folks? Not just the water within, but the water around the moon's wave. So, if we need to clear out some stuff, or if we need to bring in new organisms so we have new kind of fertilization of our land, the moon's wave. It controls all the water. All the water. Then we have the gathering together then of this group from the farthest places, 44. As we see, this number will return through many numbers, for as we find, there is the law pertaining to each and every element significant to man's existence considered and given in one manner or form by the groups as gathered at this meeting. We are through with this present. They literally said, we are through for the present. We are done talking to you. Oh, if people only knew. We are done with this. We are done. Oh my goodness. You gotta laugh. You gotta have fun. So pay attention, because 44 is gonna come back up. They literally just said the 44 people coming to these meetings, there is the law pertaining to each and every element significant to man's existence, considered and given in one manner or form by the groups as gathered at this meeting. And I'm going to quickly jump. So what do y'all think? Leave a note, leave a comment, tell me in the chat, what are you all thinking? Are you kind of shocked that it was, what, 133 million humans? 133 million humans. That humans were everywhere. That the earth from present time to back to when they're discussing, and this was the second rule, 10.5 million years. We've been around for 10.5 million years. Actually, longer now, right? Let's read that again. The period in the world's existence from the present time being 10.5 million years, and the changes that have come in the earth's plane may have risen in the lands. Many lands have disappeared. Many have appeared and disappeared again and again during these periods, gradually changing as the condition became to the relative position of the earth with the other spheres through which man passes in the solar system. Y'all. I'm not gonna get into further reading, but this is think about those gatherings. I have talked before about how there was a council and how the council was getting directed by, let's say, higher forces. There's always been a council of some sort, and sometimes councils get corrupted. That's why we get things like the second ruler. So listen to this question, because I believe this is where we're going to go then next time. This is the question. I'm not going to read it, but this is the question. So you guys can prepare for next time in your minds. Go back in your memory. I wonder. This is from reading 262 39, February 21st, 1933. This was the question. Please advise me regarding the preparation and presentation of the article or story which I am preparing on the Great Congress held during the age of the destruction of the enormous animals that once roamed the earth. So clearly, whoever HLC that's asking the question is trying to put together some kind of presentation, and they need more information about the Great Congress, the gathering, the court, the 44, during the age of the destruction of the enormous animals. That's where we're going to go into, because they're asking not just about the animals, they're asking about this great Congress. We have to talk about those who gathered. We have to talk about these laws that we are still subjecting ourselves to. We have to talk about these things as in what the Akashics gave through Cayce, through man's viewpoint, man's viewpoint, not necessarily the souls that dwell within man, but man's viewpoint. We got to talk about this stuff, guys. We're in a great change right now. So, this is why this source material is important. How did we slay the beast before? What is this man's viewpoint all about? The judgment. What is this 44 fellows going around teaching us? What are these laws that we subject ourselves to? And the first, self preservation. Ain't that interesting? So, thanks everybody for coming. Helen, yes. Helen said, I'm just going to say that there's always been a council. Yes. Yes, there's always been. There's always been. And thank you, Shelley. Yeah, we've been here for a long time, for a very long time. I don't even know what science tries to, you know what? And honestly, you can't right now. I I think science is even being tested, as in, sometimes I watch things like the Graham Hancock stuff. What a great guy. What a great guy. I like good people, right? I do like good people. Um, uh, that's like I'll watch this stuff and I'll be like, "Good. Throw that in their face." Throw this in their face. Throw that in their face. Let's spice it up. Let's rock the boat a little bit. So I think we're even entering into a time of more people acknowledging, yeah, those all them records that people think we have and all these ideas, all these time frames, all this what were people doing, right? What were people doing? And the fact that in a lot of history books, they are not going to give the human race that kind of population and number. 133 million humans just boop. down into the earth, boop. They all just came at once, boop, projected in, boop, right? They're not going to give that any credence. I don't think they're gonna give that any credence. They like to have us think of the Darwin evolution, even when it gets to biblical terms, they do not speak in that kind of populace of peoples. And so even that in itself, which I think some of us with our memories just, does that resonate with you? Did you pop in, boop, and there was a bunch of other peoples? Yeah, right? I think a lot of us can, at least maybe resonate with some of this stuff. Even this concept of the council, which, as we know here, if you've been with me for a while, I have many thoughts on all the different councils and what has happened with those. So I'm glad everybody came in. Good to see everybody. Shelly said, bop, boop, bop. Yep, all of it. Um, Thanks everybody for coming. Helen, it was good to see you, my dear. Shelly, of course. Venus, always, my dear. Thanks everybody for coming. Chloe, my dear, good to be with you. Uh, Once again, I might do one more of these and then I gotta give everybody time to catch up. So we'll probably head into his biography soon again. And his biography is always a good time, putting the humanity back into such that special man. So stick with us. I'll see you guys later. Bye, folks.